Welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, where we share all kinds of tips, advice, and interview guests on all things innovation and leadership in modern marketing. Each episode is a conversation with inspiring people who make wonderful contributions to our knowledge in these areas and spark curiosity and ideas to pursue. Join me, Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and let's get into today's masterclass on this InnovaBuzz podcast.
The market for podcasting will obviously continue to grow. And I think as it grows, the industry in general will experience growing pains. For example, a lot of the big brands are now more and more getting into podcasting, investing in branded podcasts and doing interview style podcasts. And so I think the positive is that it raises the bar. So now you have to have more than just a show. You have to be intentional about the questions that you ask. You have to pay attention to quality more now than you did before. You have to really be strategic and deliberate and intentional.
Hi there, Innovator. It's really great to be back with another episode. I hope you've had an awesome week so far. And I hope you enjoyed my recent conversations with Dr. Sandy Eveleth, optometrist and digital marketing consultant, and with Nadine McGrath of Creative Content Co. I'm really excited today to have on the InnovaBuzz podcast as my guest, Elzie Flenard of Enterprise Now. Elzie is a business leader, an entrepreneur, a creative, a coach, and a speaker. He has coached basketball teams. He's run a music recording and production company, and today he's host of both the Enterprise Now podcast and the Life Me podcast. And he runs a podcast agency that provides production, training, and coaching services. A quick promotional message from our sponsor, InnovaBuzz, where we help coaches and consultants build professional credibility, engage their target audience, and connect with their ideal clients. To help you get clarity about who your ideal client is, take a look at our Marketing Master mini class. In less than 30 minutes, you'll get absolute clarity on your ideal client and how you can communicate with them to build and strengthen an engaging, enduring relationship. Access the Marketing Master mini class at innovabiz.co/marketing master. In our discussion today, Elzie talked to me about lessons from the world of basketball that he applies to business. He explained that failure is only a temporary state, and it provides valuable lessons. And he explained how he approaches storytelling and his 3 C's: connection, cultivation, and communication. Without further ado then, let's fly into the hive and get the buzz from Elzie Flenard. Hi, I'm your host Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm really excited to welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast today, all the way from the greater Milwaukee area in Wisconsin in the USA, Elzie Flenard. Elzie is the founder of Enterprise Now, which is a podcast agency that helps businesses launch, grow, and maximize through podcasting, through coaching, and through training. Welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast, Elzie. It's a great privilege to have you as my guest.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to talk podcasting.
Now, Erica Castner, who was our guest on episode 132, she connected us on LinkedIn. So a big shout out to Erica.
Yeah, thanks much, Erica. She's one of those guests that that stand out. I don't know about you, but I've done a couple of hundred of these types of conversations, and there are always those guests that kind of stand up and stick in your mind, and Erica's one of them.
Erica, yeah, and we've certainly been having lots of conversations following up from the episode she was on InnovaBuzz and talking on LinkedIn, and as I said, she connected me with you as well.
Yep.
Now, you're a business leader, you're an entrepreneur and a creative. I know you use your voice to speak, to podcast, and even sing. So we'll
Mhm.
explore that a little bit. you, ho- you host the Enterprise Now podcast. You also have the Life.me podcast.
Mhm.
And I'm really looking forward to digging into all things podcasting with you. But before we do that, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get to where you are today, and what were some of the key moments in that journey?
Yeah, I'll give you the abbreviated version. So basically, I grew up in a small town. The small town I grew up in has zero stoplights. We had one gas station, one grocery store, that type of town. But it was a really cool upbringing because everyone knew everyone. You waved at people on the street, and it was that type of environment. So when I was going through high school, I was just going to go to the army because I really didn't think I was smart enough to go to college. I didn't think I could afford it, and I actually had an army recruiter tell me, he said, you'll never go to college. And I remember as a 17-year-old sitting there, and something changed, something snapped in my brain that said, not only am I going to go, but I'm going to go and I'm going to excel. And so that kind of shifted my mindset from not believing that I could do things to believing that I could do everything. And as much as I wish I could take sole credit for it, I had people in my corner, like my mom, my big sister, who believed in me even more than I did. And from that moment forward, whatever I set my mind to do, I took the same approach. I said, okay, here's what I want to do. And then I worked backwards. I said, all right, what do I need to know in order to get there? Who do I need to bug, to pick their brain, to learn the
Yeah,
information? And I just became this voracious, tenacious person that would not be stopped. So fast forward, after getting married, having a couple of kids, doing the whole, family thing, I really got this burning passion to really expand out and do my own thing and become a business owner and entrepreneur. It was always there, but as I got older, I kind of realized that, hey, long term, this is what I want to do. So I need to do it. It wasn't a situation where it was even a want. It was a need at that point. It was something inside of me that needed to do this. So I couldn't live with my 90-year-old self and looking back with regrets, wishing that I had done my own thing. And so I started a music company, a record label, and did that for a little while, and kind of shifted away from doing that to doing some music production. Ran a a minor league basketball league for a little while. So I've done a few different types of things over the course of my career as a business owner, and each step along the way, I've learned some valuable lessons, not only about business but about myself. How
Mm,
do I deal with rejection? How do I I've had people walk out on me when I gave them my ideas and plans before, so I know what it's like to be rejected to your face. I know what it's like to have a vision and then see it explode and blow up into flames. I know what it feels like to have to tell people, we have to stop, and so I think those experiences have made me the person and the business person that I am today.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's a uh, really interesting and fascinating story, and it's always amazes me how often people are told when they were young, at school or wherever, that you can't do that, or you won't amount to anything, which is something that I was told. And my mother told an interesting story about how she responded to the teacher who told her that. But yeah, hopefully these days you don't need someone to tell you that before you prompt it into action. Doesn't sound like it.
Yeah, no, I've turned the corner on that one.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I was fascinated. The basketball one is a little bit left field of the whole journey. I didn't come across that in my research. So how did that come about?
hmm Well, I played in high school. I was pretty good. It was a small town, so
Hmm.
I started all 4 years. I was a four-year letterman, if you will. But I never had the desire to play beyond high school because at the time I was dating my wife and my now wife, and really had to focus on some things on the family side. So basketball wasn't at the top of the
Hmm.
list, but have a passion for the game because of the competitiveness, the just the concepts and principles, teamwork, being an individual performer, but having to rely on your team. So all those same concepts, right,
Hmm.
that you have to rely on in business are there in sports. And so I ran across this league that it gave me the opening to launch a team here in Milwaukee. Took the opportunity, and it when I don't want to say that it failed, because failure to me is not a permanent state. It's a temporary thing. So there were things that I lacked in terms of business knowledge and experience that I think had I known those things then, the outcome would have been different. But yeah, it was a wonderful experience. I learned a ton about, again, myself. I learned a ton about business and about basketball. So it was a fun ride.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. Now I know you mentioned you are a musician, and I think when we first spoke, you told me that ever since you can remember, you've been a musician and musically inclined. Um, and so, was that the trigger for getting into radio and into podcasting?
Sort of. So I tell people there are two things that all of my passions revolve around. That's me talking and a microphone. So whether it's podcasting, speaking, singing, those two things are always present. Me, my mouth moving, and a microphone. So I've always been, interested in meeting people, hearing their stories, and telling stories. Music is a way of telling a story. Podcasting is a way of telling a story. Speaking, same thing. It's a way of telling a story.
Hmm.
So my life, my purpose on this planet is to impact people by and through telling stories. So that looks a lot, that looks different in the different formats, but essentially, that's what I do. I tell stories, whether it's, again, music, podcasting, or speaking.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. So, what uh, I'm curious, what makes a really interesting story? So, you talked about storytelling in those different media, and I'm guessing whether a piece of music, a song, becomes popular, or whether a speech gains attention and is looked at a lot of times on YouTube, if that's where it lands, or whether a podcast becomes popular, and it's about story, is really about how interesting is that story to the audience and how engaging is it. So what are some of the key points there to make an interesting story?
Yeah, I think connection it has to be the first one, because when you connect, again, whether it's in a song, right now, if I were to hum your favorite tune, it would take you to a place, it would take you to a
Mm,
time, it would take you to a feeling or an emotion or an event, right? So it connects you with that moment, with that feeling, with that emotion. So connection, I think, is the number one um, differentiator. If you can connect, then you have an opportunity to then tell their story. So that's why in music they call it a hook, because
mm,
if you're hooked in, if you're connected with that main piece, now you can listen to the verse and the chorus and the bridge, and now it kind of supplements all the rest of that. I think narrative as well. Narrative and story they're different, right? So narrative is the scene, the emotion, the perspective, the frame of reference, the mindset that's all shaped around that experience, right? That connection. So I guess the best way to describe it would be, if you think of your favorite song right now, the narrative would be, where were you when you heard this song for the first time? How did it make you feel? Was it cold outside? Do you remember who you were with? And the smile I remember, for example, the smile on my wife's face when we danced to our wedding song. Right. So
Mm.
I can picture the people surrounding us. And so the narrative is, all the things around that moment and that connection point. So I think when you have a good connection and a great narrative, then it's going to resonate with people and create impact.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good good explanation of how that works. And I think one of the key points there for me is, how does the story or the music or whatever it might be, how does it make you feel and where does it take you? So what does it remind you of? And I heard a story from another podcast guest a little while ago, and he related this story about someone who wanted to meet Elton John, which is he was in a position to be able to make happen.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
but he said, I don't do that for people just to get a selfie with Elton John, because they can then show their friends and say, look, I met this famous musician. And one of the people that asked him told him a story about how his dad used to drive him to school every day. And in those days, they had CDs, and they had one CD of Elton John. So they'd play that CD of Elton John while he was driving to and from school, and they'd both be singing at the top of their voices, and they'd have a ball. And he said, my dad's since long passed away, but every time I hear Elton John's music,
Hmm.
my dad's in the car with me.
Yeah, there you
So
go.
mm,
There you go. You nailed it.
yeah, yeah. So that to me, that is a really great example of that, being transformed back into a situation or into an environment, and generating that feeling from the story.
Hmm.
Hmm. All right. Well, let's talk about podcasting then. So, why do you think it's a good idea for a business to be podcasting? And I mean, I know your business is built around podcasting, but
Hmm.
why is it a good idea for any business to think about podcasting as one means of connecting with their audience?
Hmm. How much time do we have? Really, to be completely honest, I think it really goes back to what we're talking about. It's telling the story of your brand, of your business, of your why. I think we talked a little bit before we hit record here, how people tend to connect with people that they like, know, and trust. Right? It's marketing
Hmm.
101,
Yeah.
and especially these days, this move toward the why, the who behind the business, I think is going to continue to be important. So podcasting is a really good way to connect, cultivate, and communicate, right? So it's really hard to communicate with someone that you haven't connected with. And
Hmm.
it's impossible to cultivate a relationship that you haven't connected and communicated. So my three C's are connection, cultivate, and communicate. If you can do those three things, then you're going to see success and a return on your investment for your business.
Hmm. Yeah, I like that. The three C's. So with a podcast, then, I mean, a lot of people start out a podcast and they kind of fizzle out after about 6 or 7 episodes. I think episode 7 is the critical one, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Um, the what do you think would help people get beyond that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things with podcasting is to do it correctly. It's a lot of work. So
Mm,
I think if you have that understanding going into it, it kind of helps. And the reason people get pod fade after episode 7 is they do the first 3 or 4, and everybody's excited. Their family and friends, they've gone and they've rated and reviewed, and now at episode 6, it's like, oh, this is actually work. If I want to stand out, I have to be creative. I have to, I have to. This is really work, and then they begin to realize that, man, this is kind of taking me away from my core business here. And so, what I would always tell people is, number one, understand that it's going to be a lot of work if you do it correctly, and number two, be self-aware enough to know which parts that you are willing to do yourself, and which parts that you might want to contract or subcontract out when you get big enough. So I think when you have those two things in mind, even if you have to slug through it for a while, you get to the point where you can hire someone else to do the editing because it's tedious and it's time consuming. Or if you want to hire someone else to do the social media, because this, again, you have to be creative. This podcasting is increasing in popularity, so a lot more people are doing it. So you have to be strategic and intentional about how you're presenting your brand and getting it out there. So I would say those two things: self-awareness and understanding that there's a lot of work, and don't try to do everything yourself. Get a coach. Get someone who can help you along the way, teach you how not to. I had a mentor tell me one time, Elzie, find your own potholes to fall into. So I would say the same thing for podcasting. There are people out here who, really have a passion for it and have done all the learning. So take a shortcut, get a coach and somebody who can walk you through those things so that you don't have to, spend precious time learning things that have already been learned.
Yeah, and I think that's great advice that applies across the board in business. It's not just a podcasting, but certainly with podcasting, that there are a lot of podcasts out there now. I can't remember the number I heard the other day, but it was actually less than I thought. It's sort of several 100,000. And I thought, well, that's, in the scheme of the world population, it's not actually that much. So for anyone that's thinking, podcasting, there's so many out there, it's too late to get on. No, it's not. Jump in. But I think one of the things, you mentioned that it's a lot of work and so on. When people are first starting out, what are some of the things they should be thinking about in addition to how they're going to manage all the work that goes into it, and who can they get help from, whether that be in the form of coaching or getting some of the work done by somebody else?
I would say the big one is their why. And I know that sounds kind of fluffy, but it's true. Why podcasting? Why are you doing this? Because your why is going to keep you going when it gets hard, when it gets to be work, and you'll remember the whole point. I tell people all the time, focus on the focus, right? Don't forget about the whole point. And I know for me, I genuinely enjoy reaching out, connecting, and meeting cool people. Like when I woke up this morning, I was super excited because I knew that this evening I'm going to get to hop on the line with you and talk podcasting and business. And so it gets me up in the morning. It puts a smile on my face. And so when it gets to the point where it's a ton of work, I'm like, oh, well, but I get to meet the most fantastic, intelligent, bright minds all over the world. And so for me, that keeps me going. So I would say really understand your why and why you're doing it, and that'll carry you through the tough times, so to speak.
Yeah, that's great advice, and I think again that applies across the board in business. Really getting down to understanding your own why you're in business, and why you want to do the podcast, and then what's the key message of the podcast. And I certainly relate to what you said about meeting all these wonderful people. I always get excited to get on these podcasts, and I always find that after I've done a conversation like this, I'm buzzing for the rest of the day and really excited to go in and listen to it again, or what was that bit he said in the middle? I have to go and listen to that again because I was paying attention to writing something down and then I missed a bit. Yeah. All right. Well, tell us about your podcast. So you've got two, Enterprise Now and Life.me. So I know a little bit about Enterprise Now, but I actually I've looked at some Life.me on your website, but I haven't actually listened to that one yet.
Yeah, so Enterprise Now, as you know, is a business and entrepreneurship podcast, and really, what I like to focus on is the person behind the business. It's great that that you have a business and you're doing well, but what I really like to focus on is your mindset, how you overcome challenges, what's your methodology. I have had a couple of people give me answers to that question that blew my mind. It's like I would have never thought of that in a million. So part of it for me is the education. I get to learn from these people, and to exchange ideas and thoughts. Life Me is I struggle releasing that because I thought, well, why in the world would people want to listen to me and my life? I'm not that exciting. I'm just a regular dude that does regular things, and but it's turned out to be a really cool opportunity to kind of share, as I mentioned before, some of those potholes. I've fallen in a few in my day, and it's an opportunity for me to say, hey, watch out for this pothole. But if you do fall in the pothole, reach out. Let's talk about it. Let's talk through it, and I can share with you the way that I was able to overcome falling in that pothole, because the way that I overcame it might be different than the way that you need to overcome it. So Life Me is about life. It's about again focusing on the focus. The thing that I endear the most about life is the experience. It's the people. It's not the things, and things are great. They're awesome, but it's about people, and it's about sharing experiences and stories and knowledge and wisdom with people. So that's what Life Me is about. It's about life.
Yeah, that's great. And it's I look at that and first of all, the interview series you mentioned, like Enterprise Now, I see my interview podcast as just a means of having a free masterclass with somebody, and I've had some amazing guests on this show that probably would charge tens of thousands of dollars for an hour of their time if I said, can I sit down with you and ask you a bunch of questions so I can learn some more about this particular topic.
You can't tell them that, Dirk, and now they're on to you.
Yeah. Well, sometimes people really enjoy this conversation anyway. So I think that's part of it too, is making sure that the guest enjoys it.
Yep.
But yeah, sharing lessons that you've learnt with other people, I think there's huge value in that. And it comes back to this. You talked about mindset. It comes back to this idea of, if I've learned something, there's almost a duty. I almost feel a duty to share it with other people that might benefit from that lesson.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's for me, part of being in business is giving back and paying it forward, because there have been people in my life, in my business career, and from my personal life that have shared things with me and given me knowledge that have saved me a ton of time and a ton of heartache. So I agree. I feel obligated to pay that forward.
Yeah. All right. Now, I know in your music business, when you're a music producer and so on, you started out in internet radio and then you moved on to podcasting. So what are some of the key differences as you sort of moved into podcasting from internet radio?
Yeah, so I'll give you a 1 minute story of how that kind of evolved. So I ran an internet radio station. I had about, I believe at our peak, about 10 or 12, 10 or 11 different shows that were on the station. And the idea was, again, the same. The purpose was the same, is to share business knowledge with entrepreneurs and business owners all over the world in a format that they could easily digest. And so I'm doing research one day. I'm looking at my vision board, and I'm thinking, okay, what other ways can I do this? What other formats? What other platforms can we use to expand and get our message out there? And I run across podcasts. And long story short, I fell in love with the medium. I did research, and I calculated and forecasted that this podcasting thing is probably going to grow, and I think is going to grow for many years to come. So I pivoted. I pivoted my entire business. I shut down the internet radio station and went full on podcasting.
And what were some of the lessons you learned from particularly the music production part of your career that then applied to podcasting and helped you kind of do the production part of the podcasts?
Mhm. I think relationship. One of the things that I pride myself on is when I'm working with clients, I really want to understand, number one, them, how they work, how they think, how they how they exist in the world, in the business space. And two, it taught me how to listen, because when you're producing a song, or writing a song for someone who may not be able to sing that song or to articulate that song in with their own voice, you have to then become their translator, if you will. So now I have this songwriter who's not a singer, but a singer who's not a songwriter. So now, in coming in the middle of it, I have to say, okay, how do I translate what the songwriter is intending, what they feel, what they see, to the singer, so that they feel and see the same thing, so that when they sing it, you hear what the songwriter intends for you to hear. So it really gave me the ability to take those different perspectives, and translate it, and then put it together in a way that makes sense to the audience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So how does that apply then when, let's say, for example, on a show like this where you're the host and you're interviewing a guest? So how do some of those lessons apply there?
Same deal. So if I'm the host of the show, then my job as the host is to, number one, make the guests feel comfortable, get them to share things that they might not have shared other places, and to really to craft the narrative in a way that when the listener hears the episode, they like, know, and trust the guest, right? So whether that's making the audio clean, so that I'm taking out the ums, the ahs, or stitching it together in a way that it's cohesive. Because believe it or not, sometimes podcast guests get on there and they ramble and they just talk about things that have nothing to do with anything, like I might have done during this interview. So really just taking that and crafting a conversation that translate well to the listener, and really continuing and building that relationship with them, because in a way they are that songwriter, and I'm taking their song, their vision, their passion, and I'm translating it to the listeners in a way that tells that story. And on
Mm.
the production side is, knowing how to turn the knobs, and or knowing when to cut, when to not cut, without making it robotic and taking the emotion out of it. So really, there are tons of similarities to music production and podcast production.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a great analogy there in terms of bringing the song, if you like, of the guest to life and bringing that story the way it was, the way they feel it, and they perhaps can communicate it best to the audience.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. And I always like to have at least one question that the guest hasn't been asked before on a podcast. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll see how we go today. All right. So we've talked about podcasting as, a rapidly growing medium. What do you see that's changing right now in podcasting, and things that might be coming down the pipeline in the future?
Um, I think the market for podcasting will obviously continue to grow, and I think as it grows, the industry in general will experience growing pains. For example, a lot of the big brands are now, more and more, getting into podcasting, investing in branded podcasts, and doing interview style podcasts. And so, I think the positive is that it raises the bar. So now you have to have more than just a show. You have to be intentional about the questions that you ask. You have to pay attention to quality more now than you did before. You have to, really be strategic and deliberate and intentional. Whereas 3, 4, 5 years ago, if you had a podcast, that was enough. It's like, wow, he has a podcast. Let's listen.
Yeah.
Now there's more competition, and now again the big boys, very similar to music. You have Sony Music that they have people who all they do is write. So the same thing with podcasting. You have people all they do is write narrative, and now there are different types of podcasts. So there's nonfiction, and there's fiction, and there's shows like Blackout, and et cetera. So I think it's it's growing in a way that is good for the overall industry. But I think the independent podcasters are now in a position where we have to do a couple of things. We have to continue to learn and grow and to increase our production value. And I think we have to collaborate more. One of the things that I'm excited about with this interview is, our businesses are very similar in terms of some of the services we provide, but I think it's important, and it's a maturation thing. I think both of us have been in business long enough to know that, number one, there's tons of work out there, and number two, you learn a lot from collaborating and sharing and exchanging ideas with your counterparts. So I think as independent podcasters grow, we have to collaborate more if we're going to remain relevant and take advantage of where podcasting is going. So those two things, just continuing to learn and grow, and it's just being a lot more collaborative and not seeing each other as competition.
That's great advice. And I think the idea of, independent podcasters, this probably is a trend that's applied in other areas as well, as big companies with a lot of resources and a lot of expertise that can easily be applied here, such as, the Sonys that you've mentioned. Obviously, they've got lots of know-how on recording techniques, and they've got lots of resources of people who can write scripts or write music or produce shows. And, there's lots of other examples out there. So as they get involved, the quality increases and it gets harder and harder for the small 1 and 2 man operations to compete with that. So the getting together and cooperating and learning the lessons is always valuable. And I see the smaller groups as being a lot more flexible and being able to kind of push the boundaries quicker, whereas the big organizations, they bring in all their expertise and resources, but they're not prepared to kind of push the boundaries out. So it's a kind of, there's the two really good benefits there, and taking the mindset of there's plenty of work out there for everyone is a really good approach, I think.
Yeah, and I think along the lines with what you're all about, innovation, right? So innovation, I think, works both ways, right? Because when you're a large organization, it's actually sometimes more difficult to innovate because once you've created this machine, it's very difficult to change that machine because there's so many different moving pieces, and then there's the fear that this change is going to upend our business model, which in some ways that's actually a good thing, but that's difficult at that level to communicate and get people to buy into. The famous example of Blockbuster Video and Netflix. There were plenty of opportunities. The trend was there. A blind man could see where the market was going, but they didn't take heed. They didn't change, and we see the results. And that's the same story over and over and over. So I think so. Innovation is one of those things that you're almost the moment that you stand still, you begin to fall behind. So I think to your point, that's an advantage if you're small and nimble. I can look 3-5 years out and say, I think the market is going this way, and I can pivot. Whereas the larger organizations, that's much more difficult.
Yeah, that's right. And I lived through the photography one. So my very first job as a hobby photographer, of course, I was rapt that I got a job with one of the big film photography companies. I have to learn to say it. And of course, within a short space of time, digital photography was born, and I saw the writing on the wall very quickly. But the digital or the film photography companies, all of them, didn't realize what was going on, or they couldn't move quickly, and they had this philosophy that we're in business to provide great film for photographers, but what they didn't realize was it was actually quite different, their business. It was providing a means for capturing a memory for people, and the moment there was other ways to do that had benefits, their business model was under threat.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same with the Blockbuster and Netflix thing. So Blockbuster, I think, thought that they were in providing CDs for people to take home to watch movies at home, whereas it was actually one level above that, which is, make it easy to access entertainment on demand.
Yep, you nailed it.
Yeah. Great. All right. Well, one of the other things about podcasting, you mentioned social media a little bit earlier in the conversation, and social media is a big thing in terms of growing the podcast and growing the audience and getting the message out there. What are some of the things that you recommend for people to grow their audience and to get their podcast better known?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, being authentic and really providing value. I think, again, 4 years ago, it was enough to post, hey, this week we're talking to this person, press play to listen. And that worked. Now there are a ton of those, right? If you scroll down your LinkedIn feed, you can pick them right out. So I think being, again, authentic to your why, your voice, what value are you adding, is, I think, the best way to kind of grow that listenership. Because when you add value to somebody, they're going to go to your website, they're gonna follow you, they're going to consume all of your content, and they're going to listen to your show, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's, again, being strategic about what value you're adding, and doing that in a consistent way.
Yeah, great advice. And I think there's a big message there in terms of adding value. And so, adding value through the podcast itself, but then adding value in the messages that you're sending out, whether it be through social media or wherever else you might be putting that. So rather than just saying, well, we've published the latest episode, actually state what the value is, or share some value from that episode, which is what we like to do.
Yep. Yeah, and not to mention email. I think email is huge, building your email list, because it's kind of a step in the cultivation right direction. So you've connected with them. You're adding value. They want to hear more from you. So really building your email list, I think, is important as well.
Yeah, I think email is an interesting one. I'm going through some work at the moment about with writing emails and how to take potential customers on a journey through email. And there's so much that can be done that I'm learning from this particular course, which is often overlooked. And people send out emails, and I get them all the time. Emails that I straight to trash, and they're not spam emails. They're things that I've signed up for, but there's just no value in the email that I then get. It doesn't help me at all, and yet I actually signed up for something from that person. So there was some value there at some point, or at least I thought there was.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can do so much more with email.
Yeah, it's definitely tricky, if I can use that word, because you want to add value, you want to continue to cultivate the relationship, but you don't want to overdo it, which is really easy to do. If I send you 3 emails a day, you're gonna probably not open the next one. So it is tricky, but I think it's very powerful if used correctly.
All right, now. So do you do video with your podcast?
I don't. The format that I typically will use is with the audiograms. It's the still picture with the sound. But I think moving forward, I wanted to do more with it, but I haven't done so as much to date. So, how about you? Are you doing video with your show?
Yeah, I started off with video in the early days, and then I stopped doing it after a while because it was a lot more work to edit with the videos. And at some point, I think it might have been James Schramko said to me, and we were having this conversation. He said, "Well, just stop doing video." And I thought, "Oh, I'd never actually thought of that." I'd sort of put myself under pressure to do this video podcast, and I thought, well, really, it's just two heads talking most of the time, so there's not a lot of visual stuff that is contributed. So I stopped doing it, and it made it a lot easier to do all the editing and. Yeah, also our internet connections in those days, it's a lot better now, but in those days was really bad. So occasionally the video quality would be so poor that it wasn't usable anyway.
Got it. Yeah. And for me, I again, going back to the focus on the focus, I'm an audio guy, right? Music, speaking. I mean,
Yeah.
so for me, audio, and I think too, it's a different way to consume content. For example, this morning when I went to the Y and did my workout, I'm listening to a podcast. I can't necessarily. I suppose you could watch a video when you're walking if you're inside, but I mean, I wouldn't advise
Inside,
it
yeah.
outside to watch a video while you're walking because
Yeah,
you may be
no.
run over by a car, etc. But it's a different experience, right? You can listen to audio while washing dishes, while you're doing other things, and it's a passive medium. So, so for me, I'm an audio guy through and through.
Yeah. No, I think what you hit on something there that is really important benefit of podcasting. You can, most people do it while they're doing other things, whether it's, cleaning the house themselves or out walking. I tend to have my headset on pretty much all the time when I'm out walking in the park or something like that, if I'm on my own.
Mhm.
And even occasionally on the bike, although I probably shouldn't say that. Might not be as safe as you could be. But
Mhm.
we've got quiet roads here. So when I'm on quiet roads, I will occasionally listen to a podcast.
Mhm.
So what other ways do you repurpose the content from the podcast?
We do sound bites, 1 minute to 2 minute snippets. Obviously, there's the transcripts. Some of our clients we repurpose them as articles or blog posts, and then tweetables. The usual suspects, I guess. We don't do a ton of story based content yet, but one of the things that I really want to get into is really grabbing the raw audio and crafting stories from it. So really just being creative on the different ways. But right now, those are the main ways that we're repurposing.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, isn't it? Because there's so much content there, and I was reflecting back. So we're getting close to episode 250, and I was reflecting back, thinking, there's so much content there, and so much valuable content. Is just sort of probably needs a lot more attention and a lot more repurposing to get the maximum value out of it.
Mhm. Yeah,
So I'm
I
always
certainly
interested.
have enough notes that I could probably write a book from all of the different
Mm,
insights and things. So yeah, definitely understand there.
yeah. All right. Well, I could go on talking podcasting for ages, but I'm just watching the time here a little bit, and I think that was a good segue too to go into the Buzz round, which is our innovation round designed to help our audience who are primarily leaders and innovators in their field with some tips from your experience. So I've got 5 questions, and hopefully you'll give us some inspirational answers that'll have the audience go and do something awesome today.
Don't put that much pressure on me, Jack.
So, what do you think the number one thing is anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
This is going to sound simple, but I think it's powerful. I would say pay attention, follow the signs, because they're always signs. They're always indicators, right? So when you're paying attention, listen to what people are saying. Listen to people's behavior. Watch what they're doing. Observe. This on-demand movement isn't surprising. The consumer behavior has been moving this direction for years. And I think innovation is about spotting those trends and then providing a solution to those problems or to those challenges. So I think, again, it just boils down to paying attention and being aware, and watching and listening people's behavior and what they're saying, without saying, and being strategically positioned to take advantage of those things.
Yeah, I love that. And if you're really clear about your focus on your business and self-aware about where are your strengths and where are things you can use those strengths and create things, then matching the listening and paying attention and what you're learning there is where you drive that innovation.
Yep.
Great. Well, what's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
I have probably, I don't know if you can see it on the video here, but I probably have 3 or 4 whiteboards. I have a handheld whiteboard. I have a big whiteboard. I have a whiteboard. I have a virtual whiteboard. So I have a lot of whiteboards, and I have about 1,000 sticky notes with different ideas, different things on them. And occasionally, I'm a thinker, so I'll spend hours literally just thinking about things, right? Evaluating, where am I? Where do I want to be? How do I position myself to do the next thing? And again, listening to my clients. What are they saying? Am I having conversations continually about access to podcasts, or not being able to find them, or things like that? So that might drive a course, right? So if 12 of clients are telling me that, Elzie, I would listen to podcasts, but I don't really know how to access it. So that's telling me, okay, maybe a course on how to access a podcast is in order. So really, again, just listening, and to your point, being self-aware. Does what I see happening match what I can bring in terms of value? Is it in my area of expertise? If it is, then I provide it. If it's not, then I'm knocking on your door, Jurgen. Here's what I see, here's what I'm hearing. Let's partner together, and let's meet the need of the people. So I think, again, going back to the maturation, and self-awareness and paying attention and knowing and hearing, it might be something that I can't provide. So I need to go and find a potential partner. Here's what I see, here's what I hear. Can we collaborate? Can we partner to meet this need? So I think so really just being attentive and aware and asking people and listening is key.
Yeah, that's great. And I've actually, I'll show you later. I've got heaps of whiteboards over to my left here that you can't see behind me, and I've also got the little whiteboard books, and there's lots of post-it notes over there on the whiteboard as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, all right. Well, maybe that's the answer to the next question. Although maybe you have some other ones. What's one of the resources you use most often that's a favorite?
Yeah, I would say sticky notes. I literally, they're all over my desk everywhere. I even have soft sticky notes, believe it or not, that are on my OneNote. I have them in my email calendar. They're just everywhere. So I would say sticky notes is probably, ironically, they're just, I guess it's not really technology, but that's where my innovation comes from a sticky note. Say with podcasting, it was on a sticky note, like research podcasting, and that's where it all started. So I would not be able to survive without my sticky notes.
How do you keep track of the soft sticky notes?
I occasionally I'll look at my my tasks. One productivity hack that I've learned, actually more recently, is a lot of people will have their to-dos and their tasks that they need to do. But what I've started to do is assigning a time period to get those tasks and to-dos done. And then in addition to the actual task or to-do, and then every evening I look at it and I see which ones I accomplished and which ones I didn't. And I evaluate, well, I scheduled myself to do this from 8 to 9, but really I didn't do that at all. I did this. Or it ran over. So what it tells me is I either need to plan better, or I need to focus better. So the next day, I reassess and readjust, and I'll look at my calendar, sticky notes, and I'll kind of put all that together, and I'll look at the ones that are on my desk and all in the various different places, and that kind of drives what I plan for the next day and the next week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the idea of getting the to-do list into the calendar and scheduling time, because there's two things for me. I started doing this when back in my corporate career, they introduced email and calendar. So this is going back quite some time, and then people started thinking, oh, now we don't have to ring people up and say, do you have time on tomorrow at 10 or when, and you'd say no, and then it'd be phone call back and forth. So they say, oh, this is fabulous, we just schedule a time on people's calendar. And in the early days, people didn't understand how you could lock it down so somebody else couldn't schedule a meeting for you. And all of a sudden, I'd find myself being booked out by other people, and they took control of my time. And I thought, well, the smartest way to counter that is to book time in my calendar for me to do my tasks that I want to do. And ever since then, I've been doing that, and it's a really great thing in terms of knowing, okay, that's when I need to be spending time on this particular activity. And if you're disciplined enough to do that, then it gets done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it helps too with, like I said, efficiency, right? So if I schedule a task for myself for, say, 15 minutes, and I end up taking an hour and 15, then a couple of things happened. Either I got distracted and I didn't focus on the focus, or I didn't plan accordingly and I really needed an hour instead of 15 minutes. So it really kind of helps you adjust how you're assigning your tasks as well.
Yeah, that's right. All right, now we've talked about keeping ourselves on track. What's the best way to keep a client on track?
Large hammers. No, seriously. I think just providing that accountability, and I'm the type of coach, I guess you can say, that I'm not easy, but I'm not too hard, and I like to drive and push as hard as people are willing to be driven and pushed. And I think being detail oriented and helping them see the importance of being focused and getting things done on time is important as well. So really just being that sounding board to kind of hold them accountable, I think is really important. And for me, I will fire you as a client if you are not committed to the process, because as a coach, and what I think is any good coach is your success as the basketball player, if we're talking hoops, is a reflection of me. And if I see that you're not willing to put in the practice time, you're not getting your shots up, you're not practicing your free throws, when it comes game time, the GM's not going to look at you necessarily. He's going to come to me and say, "Hey, Elzie, why is this player not getting better?" So I will sit my client down and talk to him and say, "Hey, listen, you before we signed up for this, you committed that you're gonna do this, and this, and you're not. Let's get it together." So I think again, just being that accountability partner and holding them accountable for what they said that they were going to do is a really good way to keep them on track.
Yeah, that's great advice and a great analogy too. Yeah. And you're right. I think it's probably not just basketball where the coach kind of is measured by the success of the team and the players. All right. What's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
Yeah, I think for me, I thought about this, and I think for me, it's connection and telling the story of me and sharing my perspective and leveraging my creativity, because no one is going to do any task quite like you. And I think again, when you're connecting and people are embracing and really connected to your story, I think that goes a long way in doing business. I always like to try to do business with people that I like because it makes it easier, and it helps you kind of work through things better when you like each other. So I think just really being connected and offering that perspective and creativity is my main differentiator.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think, again, it comes back to a little bit of self-awareness that we talked about earlier, and knowing, what is your particular perspective that might be unique, and how do you bring that to any interaction that you have in a way that does connect with people.
Yep.
All right. Well, this has been great, Elzie. So I've really enjoyed this week, and people reach out and find out more about you, listen to your podcasts, and perhaps even reach out and say thank you for what you've shared today.
Yeah, the main way is our website, enterprisenow.net. And I'm always open to email at podcast@enterprisenow.net.
All right. We'll have links to those in the show notes, and people can click straight through. Now, do you have a parting sort of final piece of advice you'd like to leave the listener, particularly in the area of, wanting to be leaders in their field and in innovation?
Yes, I think, and I kick myself every time because this quote it really shifted my paradigm, and I cannot remember who the quote is by. So if you're listening and I misquote it, forgive me. But the quote is, put your your goals in stone and your plans in sand. And what that means is your goals are always going to be the same, no matter what that is. If it's to become an expert in your industry, or if it is to become the next great podcaster, whatever that is, that'll never change. How you get there is not going to be a straight line. I can guarantee you that. I've been around long enough to know that it's going to zig, it's going to zag, it's going to start, it's going to stop. So your plans are insane. Those are going to change, but your goals are going to remain the same. So goals in stone, plans in sand. And I think being authentic and being genuine is going to go a long way. Be an authentic expert. Don't be one of those experts who are hopping on the bandwagon and want to do it because they think that it'll be beneficial financially. Be genuinely interested in whatever that subject matter is, because people can sense authenticity and people connect to authenticity. So I think if you do those two things, if you're authentically connecting with people, you put your goals in stone, your plans in sand, you'll be successful.
Great. Yeah, I love that quote. I hadn't heard that one before, but it's certainly a lot of wisdom in that one.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks, Elzie. Now, lastly, who would you like me to chat with on a future InnovaBuzz podcast, and why?
Yes. So I thought about this a lot, and there's a lot of people that I could think about. And when you guys connect, I want you to definitely CC me on it, because this gentleman has been a fantastic influence on me, my business, and my life. His name is Paul Newberger. He's a fellow Wisconsinite, and just a fantastic human being, fantastic individual. He's smart, he's funny, a great salesperson, and his whole deal is cold call success. And I think it would be a value add to your listeners, and I think you guys will get along great.
All right. Well, we'll reach out to Paul and maybe get an introduction, and then get him on the podcast as well. Sounds like could be a fascinating conversation.
Oh yeah, no doubt that it will be.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for sharing your insights and your expertise on all things podcasting, and also broader around some of your life philosophies with us today, Elzie. I've really enjoyed this, and I'm looking forward to sharing this episode. I've learned a lot, and let's keep in touch.
All right. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that engaging and informative conversation with Elzie and took something away from his episode. Elzie shared some wonderful metaphors during the episode and provided a lot of valuable information. I was struck with his focus on connection and telling your story, which he clearly demonstrated throughout the conversation. I'd love to know what you took away from Elzie's episode. leave a comment below the blog post, which you can find at innovabiz.co/Elzie Flenard. That is ELZIE all lowercase, all one word, innovabiz.co/Elzie Flenard. You'll also find contact information for getting in touch with Elzie there, as well as links to his website, his social media pages, the Enterprise Now and the Life Me podcasts, and the other resources we spoke about in the conversation. Elzie suggested we have a conversation with Paul Newberger, the cold call coach, on a future InnovaBuzz podcast episode. So, Paul, keep an eye on your inbox for an invitation from us to the InnovaBuzz podcast, courtesy of Elzie Flenard. Remember to check out our Marketing Master mini class at innovabiz.co/Marketing Master. It's completely free and accessible without even giving away your email. But most importantly, in less than 30 minutes, you'll gain absolute clarity about who your ideal client is and how you can communicate with them to build and strengthen an engaging, enduring relationship. And if you'd like our help to go even deeper into marketing mastery or help with podcast production, then send me an email to jurgen@innovabiz.co and we'll set up a quick call just to have a conversation and find out if we're a good fit for one another. Tune in again next week to the InnovaBuzz podcast. We've got some more fantastic guests lined up, including April Sprintz of Driven Outcomes and Sheila Heen, author of Difficult Conversations. Stay connected with us by subscribing to the InnovaBuzz podcast at innovabuzz.com/subscribe. innovabuzz.com/subscribe. Make sure you never miss another episode. It would also mean a lot to me if you leave us a review, because what you think matters. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your ideas, your suggestions, or questions you have, so go ahead and share them in the comments below the blog post for this episode. Until next time, I'm Jurgen Strauss from InnovaBiz. Remember, be awesome and keep innovating.